Alright, so far in this video you've learned quite a bit. We've taken scanned art, brought the files into Photoshop, learned how to properly save a Photoshop file, set up the Photoshop file with all the dimensions and the resolution. We were able to change the size so that the dragon fit within my canvas and document. We changed some layers around and named them. One of the layers at the very top is multiply, so that sort of blends through. We can also change opacities of layers so that layers show through and have them in the right order. So this sort of allows you to engineer your digital art. Imagine trying to do this all on one layer. You couldn't do it. I guess you could, but it would be that much more difficult because you would always have to stay within the lines and you'd have to figure out what were the blends of colors. Whereas with Photoshop, because we have opacities and we have multiply, we don't have to worry about that, and makes it a lot more simplified. And by naming our layers, we can tell what is on each layer in case we want to go back, edit it. And you can always turn things on and off, like here's the highlights. Notice how that turns on and off. Here was the airbrush shadowing with and without, and even the color that we added, little spots of color, and of course the body itself. Okay, now what we're going to do next is color the background. Now by default I can't touch it because it's locked, so to unlock it, it's pretty simple. Just double click on that layer, and I'm going to call it background again, and hit OK. And now it's called background and the lock, and you can now change it. The next tool we're going to introduce you to is the gradient tool. So over here at the paint bucket on the tools side, we're going to click on it and change it to the gradient tool. There are two types of gradients. There are radial and linear. We're going to do a linear one. You'll learn about radial in other classes. The first thing we have to do is set how the gradient works. So this is a little tricky, but you need to understand how this works in order to get it to work right. If you don't do this, you might do this 20 times and wonder why didn't this work. What we're right by default here, mine is set from foreground color to transparent. And what I want to do is have foreground to background. So if I hover over this long enough, the yellow box pops up and it should say foreground to background. And I click on that, and that's actually the very first square. So what that means is at the start of my gradient, it's going to be the foreground color, and at the end it's going to be the background color. Right now I have this set to a vibrant yellow for the foreground color, and that's you can tell that by the color selector down at the bottom. To change the background, I'm going to click on that background and it should pop up a window, and I get a color picker. I'm going to choose vibrant red, and the way I know that it's as vibrant as it can be is I can look at the color properties down here. R is set to 255, which is the max, and G and blue are set to 0. It's an out of gamut color. You can't print this with 4-color printing. That's okay. We're just going to look at this on a screen, so we're fine. So let's go ahead, hit OK. And the reason why I chose those colors again is because I'm going for high contrast. I want real high contrast graphic image, which is certainly a preference of style. Some people like working in softer colors. Maybe you wouldn't even have dark black line art, because that can be pretty stark, so some people can subdue it. Now I'm going to really make this sing because I'm going to add even more contrast color. If you look at the color wheel in your color theory, the opposite complementary color to green is red, and you're going to see the red here in a second. And then the complementary color to blue, technically purple, is yellow. So you're going to have warms with this red and yellow, and then you still have some cools with the green and the blue. And to some degree, the white now on the talons is going to show up pretty well. So here we go. I've got this again set to foreground color to background color. So it gives you sort of a preview of what the gradient will do. And I got this on the background layer. Make sure you're on the correct layer. If you're on the wrong layer, don't make the mistake and cover up what you've done, because the only way to get rid of that is to undo. Alright, so here I am on the background, and I'll click and hold and drag. So I click on one far end of, and I'm actually clicking off of my off the document edge just a little bit, and then I'm going to click, drag, and hold this line and go across my screen, and when I get it to a place where I think this will work, I let it go, and there you go. It fills in the color. If you don't like it, you can undo it, or you can just keep redoing it as many times as you want, any direction you want, until you get it to a place where you like it. So let's say that's what I like as the final document. That's pretty cool. You got this very vibrant colors coming in with yellow and you get some nice contrast with the blue as well. And that's it. We can say we're done with our digital art. We come up here, we're going to save this again. So this is our Photoshop file. This gives us our working file, and I could always come back after I close this. I could open it up, and all of these layers are maintained. And Photoshop is the only program that can open a Photoshop program. Well, generally. That's why it's called PSD. It's Photoshop document. I suppose there are some other softwares that can open it, but it's intended for Photoshop. And I could obviously go and play with this art for quite a bit more, but I think you guys get the idea. So next we want to make our final file. Photoshop is an editing file. It's not necessarily a final file. So if I wanted to send this to somebody else to have them look at it, it might not work as a PSD. So it's better to save it as what's called a JPG, which is another type of raster file. So to create that, I'm going to come over here to go File, Save As. And in the same project folder, I'm going to change the format from Photoshop to JPG. And I think that stands for Joint Photographers Group. Don't ask me why I know that or why it was called that, but I think that's what it is. So we'll choose JPG as the format top. Just keep all the defaults, that's fine. When you do that, you'll see that the file extension now has .jpg. And that's good. That means you're not going to overwrite the Photoshop file. It's going to create a new file right next to it. So when I got it, I'll hit save. And then I have one last option here. I can decide how good do I want the quality of the JPG. It's already at 72 resolution, so there's really no need in trying to make the file smaller just to save file size. It's 255K right now, which isn't very big. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep it at quality 12 maximum. And I'll go ahead and hit OK. And now I'm back to my PSD file. But if I go to my desktop, here's my folder, and open up that folder, and I can see that I now have a PSD and a JPG of the same name. And then for your class assignment, when you create your digital art project, it'll be this JPG file that you will upload. JPEGs are pretty universal. You can view them on a screen, you can print them out on a printer, you can put them on websites. It's a very universal type of font, as long as it's digital. Now if you print this on a desktop, it probably will look pretty close to what you've got, but the colors won't be as vibrant. The printer can only do so well. If you went to professional printer, they would need you to convert this to CMYK first, and then they could print it, but it still wouldn't be as bright of colors. So the only way you get these bright of colors is in the RGB gamut. Okay, and there you go. There's your digital art project.